This weekend, new developments in the Russia investigations, even as President Trump says it's all over. Here's the New York Times with a big scoop on Saturday, saying that Trump's eldest son, Donald Jr., met with a Russian lawyer linked to the Kremlin just weeks after his father clinched the GOP nomination. That was in June last year. Now, this New York Times report's the first time we've seen reports of Don Jr. being in such a meeting. This story was sourced to confidential government documents obtained and seen by the New York Times. And of course, this story comes on the heels of the handshake seen and heard all around the world. That's about the only thing speaking volumes about this 2-hour meeting between the Russian and American presidents. As we were talking about before, Trump didn't hold a press conference at the end of the G20, so his only comments have come via Twitter. This is the second foreign trip in 2 months where the U.S. president has not held a press conference. It's one example of many of a relative lack of transparency. So what really happened in the meeting, and can the press hold a crucial role in keeping a spotlight on it? Joining me now, Congressman Eric Swalwell, Democrat of California, who's a ranking member of the House Subcommittee on the CIA. Congressman, great to see you.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
I think we know what President Trump and his allies think about these stories, this drip, drip, drip of stories involving meetings. What do you think?
I think we're seeing an unprecedented amount of contacts, personal, political, and financial, that Trump, his family, his team, his businesses had with Russia prior to the election. That's not illegal. However, the fact that Russia was interfering in our campaign warrants us probing whether this was a convergence or just a bunch of coincidences. The other pattern that we see is that all of these contacts are undisclosed, and only once the media have brought them to light are they acknowledged.
And what is your take on the press's role here? We've seen a lot of criticism of the press by the president and his allies, saying that this Russia story is dramatically overcovered. He would, I think, say obsessed. I suspect you disagree.
I disagree. It's critically important that the press shine a light on what these contacts were. Again, we're not talking about contacts with the Brits or the Australians or the Mexicans. These are contacts with a country that has not been our friend, and so it does deserve scrutiny. But also, you know, be fair, and if these contacts were just coincidences, the president deserves to be cleared. But so far, every time they're confronted with them, they just say it's fake news. Yesterday, the president's son tweeted out a video of a pilot shooting down a CNN plane, which seems to follow the trend of trying to distract every time a story comes close to the family around Russia.
Oh, you think that's what he was doing, trying to distract?
It's a pattern that we see.
This was a week after the president's original anti-CNN video. There's been hundreds of these anti-CNN memes, but I did think it was notable to see one of his sons sharing this stuff, you know, given how CNN said last week this encourages violence against reporters.
That's right. And what bothers me
This is the video, by the way. This is the meme that Donald Trump Jr. shared on Twitter.
We don't want a permissive environment where people feel like it's okay you know, to attack the press just because they are members of the press. And I'm afraid that that's what we're starting to see.
I wonder how you view your your role vis-a-vis the press. I see you on CNN a lot, on other networks. Are you sort of taking advantage of the media's interest in these topics as a member of the minority party to try to keep attention on these issues?
I really feel a responsibility after the November election and Russia's interference campaign that if we don't talk about what Russia did and make sure that the American people understand that they will do this again, that the story will essentially not be as important, because this is about our democracy. And, you know, we have to secure the ballot box the next election. And so I think it's really important that the American people have awareness of what Russia did and other countries may do, but that lawmakers, we understand the seriousness of giving states and counties resources to protect the ballot box as well.
But this is so polarized now. How do you try to personally persuade somebody who thinks this is all ginned up by the press or by Democrats to try to take down their president?
I hate that it's polarized, and I understand that there's, you know, concerns about the collusion investigation and, you know, are these just attacks on the president? Look, let Bob Mueller conduct his investigation. Regardless of what happens there, we know, though, that Russia will go after us again. And so I hope Republicans understand that they could be the victims next time, whether it's Russia or another country, but the unifying factor should be that we care about securing the ballot box.
And what about all of the leaks? Some Republican senators released a report this week finding 1 leak per day involving national security. Of course, these leaks benefit the New York Times and CNN and other outlets. I would argue many of these leaks benefit the American people, but there's a lot of pressure for leak investigations. Are you concerned that some of these leaks have hurt national security?
Well, some of the leaks have also been coming out of the White House. We just saw a leak that I think was intentional, where the White House suggested that they may use its ability to approve the Time Warner AT&T merger as a way to threaten the media. So we've seen the White House conduct leaks too.
Sure, there are different kinds of leaks. You bring up the AT&T Time Warner ones. Let me ask you about that. This was a New York Times story, I think you're referring to, that said Trump aides have talked about using the deal as leverage over CNN. For viewers who don't understand, Time Warner owns CNN. It's being bought by AT&T. And this is a deal that's being reviewed by the Justice Department right now. So the Times story said Trump aides have thought about using it as leverage against CNN, I suppose in order to get CNN to try not to be so skeptical of the administration. What was your reaction to the Times story?
That's not how America works. You don't get to threaten the press or bully the press by using your power in office to affect what they do on the business side. But this
sounds like you do believe the report.
Well, I believe that it was put out there not necessarily because the White House is going to have the antitrust division at the Department of Justice not allow it to go through, but I think just to have a chilling effect. This is the same thing that the president did when he sent out those tweets about James Comey, saying he better hope there are not tapes. I think the intent there was to make James Comey think twice about whether he wanted to come forward, not knowing whether there were tapes. So we've seen this before from the White House.
Let me put on screen a Huffington Post headline about this. There's been some follow-up coverage this week after the New York Times story. Michael Calderon at the Huffington Post writing this: Trump might try to threaten AT&T Time Warner deal over CNN's coverage of him. So you're saying chilling effect is what you perceive here?
I think the intent is to make the media think twice, that the White House may try and use its power over the business side of media or just the access that it gives to media if they don't get coverage that they like. And again, that's not America. That has taken us to a place we've never been, and I hope we don't go too far down that path.
One of your colleagues on the Senate side, Amy Klobuchar, released a letter. We can put it on screen, I think. This is a letter to Jeff Sessions, the Justice Department chief, asking questions about the review of the AT&T Time Warner merger. Do you have any plans, as someone on the Judiciary Committee of the House, to pursue this matter?
Yeah, when I go back, I'm going to ask my colleagues if we can find out who at the White House was putting that out there. You know, there are fair questions about whether this merger helps consumers or hurts consumers, and those should be tested. But now there are fair questions about whether the White House is trying to use this merger to quiet and suppress the press.
Congressman, thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you.
Good to see you.
Yeah, you too.
After the break here, another attempt, it seems, to suppress the press. We've seen a rise in threats, internet threats against journalists, not just at CNN, but at many other outlets. And there was that body slam, and you might remember in Montana just a few weeks ago. The reporter